Are we awake after lunch? Yes? All right, clap once if you can hear me. There we go. All right. I need a little more, and I know it's after lunch. I know everybody. I need a coffee myself, so we're together, okay? We're going to be together on this. So welcome back to the WIA World Summit for the afternoon program. We are so excited for you to be here. How many of you were with us this morning? Wonderful. Welcome back. Welcome back. And thank you, all of those who are joining us for the afternoon. We welcome you in. Just a background, I'm Julianne Cromit. I've been a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner for 13 years in media and tech, and I proudly sit on the board of WIA as both the secretary and the inclusion chair. So welcome on in. And I also identify as Latina. And I didn't say my pronouns earlier, I realized, which is she, her, and ella, because I'm bilingual. So welcome on in. Yeah, mira, pa que tú lo sepas. So we are going to play two videos of from the case studies that will be talked about actually in the panel that's to come from there. And then I will be back to introduce our fabulous moderator and get the panel started as we learn more about what folks have been doing to make change around gender justice. All right? Be back soon. Enjoy the videos.
Incessant Rain Studios, the state-of-the-art animation and VFX studio in Kathmandu, is the first of its kind in the country. Over the years, the company has played a significant role in creating a platform for local talent and put Nepal on the global map for VFX and animation production. The place was founded by Kiran Joshi, a 17-year veteran of Walt Disney Animation Studios. Incessant Rain prides itself in providing free in-house training that creates job opportunities that have never before existed in Nepal. However, it is abundantly clear that the beneficiaries of the great opportunities are mostly men, and we are doing something about it. We believe change starts at the top.
Gender justice is top priority for us at Incessant Rain Studios. I want to send a clear message that change happens at the top and that gender justice is not just a female fight, it is everyone's fight.
My first order of business as a leader was to establish a corporate culture based on ESG principles. So we launched Diversity and Inclusion Initiative 1 to improve female participation at Incessant Rain Studios. Initiative 1 drives recruitment through outreach. We develop relationships with schools and universities. We also have open house events for families because when a girl makes a decision, it is probably a family affair. We also work with the Miss Universe Nepal platform to reach their followers who are also our target demographic. Initiative 1 also has a policy component that addresses discrimination and job insecurity due to pregnancy and childbirth. It also has a communications and leadership training component. I believe that female-friendly policies and leadership and communications training help transform women into becoming change agents for themselves. We are steadfast in our commitment to gender justice, and improving participation of women in animation is a key corporate mission for Incessant Rain.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve Isaacs, and I'm the Education Program Manager at Epic Games. Our goal is to support educators in bringing tools like Unreal Engine, Fortnite Creative, and Twinmotion into the classroom to support their students in learning skills that will help them develop workforce career readiness. Interactive 3D is transforming many industries currently. Tools like Unreal Engine are being used, to transform architecture, games, film and TV, automotive, broadcast, live events, advertising, fashion, training and simulation, and manufacturing. these industries are utilizing these tools to really transform the way they work, thanks to interactive 3D and real-time rendering. The Unreal Educator Accelerator is a program that we're offering for educators. It's a 30-hour professional development opportunity that basically guides educators through learning how to bring these tools into the classroom. We've provided and offer a great array of resources that make this process easier and help soften that learning curve and help with the onboarding process. Educators can leave this training feeling confident that they can, in fact, work with these tools and guide their students along the journey towards these industry skills. One of the examples of a group that we've been working with is the Arts, Media, and Entertainment Workforce Development Initiative in California. They've created an amazing program that basically provides students with opportunities for paid apprenticeships outside of high school as an alternate pathway to careers. They have a number of amazing companies that are working with them, committing to providing these apprenticeships. Our team is excited to be offering the PD, or the professional development, to the educators to help prepare them to bring these skills to their students. Upon graduation, students will have a portfolio and be prepared to interview for these apprenticeships, and in many cases, those apprenticeships are intended to hopefully convert into full-time opportunities for students. So again, just happy to be with you today and happy to share about our program, and especially the Unreal Educator Accelerator. We offer it to a number of different ways. You can apply for one of the existing opportunities that we have, and we're also completely open to setting up opportunities specific to your community if you have a number of educators that can create a cohort for us, or we can help work with you to fit educators into an existing cohort. So thank you very much, and please feel free to reach out, Steven.Isaacs@epicgames.com. Thanks, and have a great day.
Let's give another round of applause for our awesome case studies that were just presented, the next two. By the way, if you missed the case study videos this morning and the ones we're also playing this afternoon, they'll be available on our website, womeninanimation.org, if you'd like to watch them, or watch them maybe more closely with more detail. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the fabulous Director of Operations for WIA, Jenna Olson, who will be moderating our next panel on case studies. Jenna?
All right. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. So I am thrilled to be able to talk to all of you about just a sampling of the programs that are out there really to improve gender inclusion in the industry. We've got some fantastic people up here, and my hope is that not only will you learn about these programs, but you will also feel so excited about them that you will either contact them directly about how to get involved, or maybe if you have a little bit of money, you can talk to them about how you can support. Hint, hint. So I'm going to introduce you to everyone. I also will say I'm losing my voice, which it's not good timing, but that's okay because I'm going to make them talk a lot more than me. So I'm first going to introduce to you Deepa Chapalu Joshi, who we heard from in the video just now. She is the co-CEO of Incessant Rain Studios. It's a VFX and animation studio headquartered in Nepal, and up until recently they have been a service provider, but have also started creating their own IP as well, including a superhero movie based on a globally recognized character. And we just saw about her program, their program, Initiative 1, absolutely fantastic. Next to her, we have Delphine Nicolini, artistic producer. Delphine is representing the program A Woman's Journey. It's a mentoring program for women from France and Africa who want to create short animated films but are not part of nor have access to the animation industry. The aim is to help 6 teams consisting of 1 author, 1 director, to develop a film project from concept to pitch at this year's Annecy Festival. And I believe we have some folks from the program in the room? If you are in the room, raise your hand.
I think they're on their way. They probably got a bit lost.
Okay, when you see them come in, just interrupt and we'll introduce them. So it was launched in 2021 by Le Femme Cinéma, an organization which supports women in French animation and a dear partner to WIA. We actually, and I just said that, we have a number of delegates, which we don't, but when they come in, you let us know. And then we have Sejta Wishtuki. She's Senior Manager of Global Public Policy at the Walt Disney Company, and also an incredible sponsor of the inaugural Stories by Women program. Stories by Women is a program established to increase the diversity of voices in international animation. This year's program supported a group of filmmakers, I know you're out there, I'll give you a chance in a second, representing 6 animated projects to attend the Annecy International Animation Film Festival, that's here, and pitch to potential future collaborators. Stories by Women's stated mission is to support access to international opportunities for women animators from emerging national film and audiovisual animation communities of Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America who want to tell their authentic stories, and they are fantastic stories. I do know I hope we have some people in the room. Yes, raise your hands, very, very proud. Go talk to them, please. All right, and then we have Miles Perkins, Industry Manager, Media and Entertainment of Epic Games. Miles is here today to speak about 2 programs, the Women Creators Program in India and Southeast Asia. We actually heard from Vani earlier today, who is a beneficiary of that program, and the Mega Grants Program. Inspired by the Unreal Fellowship Program, the Women's Creator Program will select India, or has selected India and Southeast Asia's talented women producers and VFX supervisors to participate in a 4-week-long training and mentoring program. 20 women are being selected and mentored by former fellowship graduates along with UE and evangelists. The objective of the program is to inspire and train women creators in the region to adopt virtual production techniques in their workflow and make a community of unreal women creators who can collaborate or make the network of like-minded creators who can create more content using Unreal. And Vani can speak directly to this training. So definitely take a moment to talk to her. She has a very good story on that. The other program is the Mega Grants Program. It's in place to promote and inspire the real-time ecosystem in various industries and verticals. And as a part of this program, EPIC looks to increase diversity within the community. Some of the examples of recipients are Women in Animation, thank you, the Women of Color Development Incubator, and Girls Who Code. And I have, last but definitely not least, Vanessa Sinden, producer at Triggerfish Animation. Triggerfish programs such as the Writers Lab both accelerate and support key creatives to take big steps ahead in their animation careers. They're seeing this impactful transformation with Black women from African continent as they worked with Netflix in the Writers Lab and then wrote the first season of Mama K's Team 4. Did I tell you we have fantastic programs? Like, unbelievable. And this is just a sampling. So do go to our website, check out the videos. You can hear my voice is starting to go. So that's my sign to turn it over to this team. So we have heard a number of times throughout the day already about the wealth of talent that is all over the world, but still is untapped at this point. So I would like to start getting a better understanding of the people that you work with in your programs and helping folks out here understand some of the barriers that they might be facing to accessing the industry, and then how programs like yours help overcome those barriers. So we're going to start with Deepa, but jump in when you're ready.
Thank you, Jenna. So based on my experience, the obstacles or barriers for women, especially in a country like Nepal, is twofold. One, entry. from a family perspective, most girls are not really encouraged to get into animation or engineering, right? So that's the first one. So we try our darnest to reach out, get girls to get interested, etc. But then they start working, and I think it's not really just our industry, it's for girls in general, right? Once they enter the workforce, it's hard to keep them there. And I am personally working very hard to address that part seriously. A woman's life, when it actually starts to grow and mature, that's when the girls that I've seen in my country face obstacles. Marriage, that contract goes way beyond what it really should be, in my humble opinion. Then pregnancy, the job insecurity that women feel, and it's real, right? And then childbirth. Those aspects of a woman that leaves a woman changed forever also impacts her in ways that is just sometimes feels impossible. So my first step was to establish a culture, a corporate culture based on ESG principles. And my teams out there was like, is this a girls' program? Is this a girls' program? And gender justice as a concept is kind of confusing to some people. So I call it a man-woman participation program, Initiative 1. And I jokingly say, if ever these women start kicking your butts, then we have to kind of focus on you guys, right? So what I focus on is a lot of leadership and communications, because the social aspects, we cannot do anything about that. But the psychosocial aspects, we can absolutely do something about that. So it really came from my heart when I said these leadership and communications training change women into becoming change agents for themselves. And it's not an evolution, I mean, it's not a revolution, it's really an evolution in thinking. And though we all know behind the scenes there also needs to be some sort of a revolution, right? But when we execute these programs, it's got to be done in a way that's very sensitive to local cultures and beliefs, and what's palatable to the women and men in that culture. And so I just take a very gentle, kind approach to it while working like hell all the time behind the scenes. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I think coming from the African continent has naturally just presents a huge amount of barriers, especially for women in the tech media industry. I think just to add to what Deepa was saying, there are huge educational barriers. You know, education is so expensive, proper education, and so that really just means that programs have to adapt and offer and fill those gaps that institutions are not doing currently. And I think a big part of having women in the industry is really allowing them to fail. We were on the other panels, we were hearing about the amazing opportunities for women to try to make their films, to make their projects, and to be supported. And so they felt confident to then continue trying. And those opportunities are not there currently. I've had the absolute privilege of working on 4 accelerator programs, and each of them have been shaped to suit writers, directors, story artists, and a creators incubator. And those incubators have really just addressed the fact that there's a huge amount of talent, but the opportunities are not there. And so linking those opportunities and allowing that talent to actually embrace that, to get involved, to be a part of the conversation, means we have unique voices telling diverse stories for the first time. And all of those things are barriers, and if they're not addressed, you're not going to see change.
I'm wondering, Vanessa, if you have an anecdote that you can share about someone who's gone through your program.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, 7 years ago, we launched the Story Lab with the giant Disney supported us on that program. And the Story Lab was really a call to the continent, creators, writers, producers, send us your ideas. We want you to take your IP and we want to develop it with you, and we want you to get greenlit. We got 1,400 submissions of ideas for TV and film and short films and specials. We were able to choose 35. I'll edit the story. We were able to choose 35 top projects, and and what a privilege to be able to work with these young creators and then whittle it down to ones that were successful and got greenlit. One of the case studies is Zambian Malenga Mulindema. She is the creator-writer of Mama K's Team 4. She literally, on the night of the submission, like a couple of minutes before the deadline and it closed, a friend had said, how come you've not submitted? This is something you've dreamt of. You're not involved in animation. You're a documentary maker in Zambia. Why don't you submit? And she was like, well, I have no story to submit. So minutes before, she wrote up something, submitted, and was like, well, what are the chances? And her project went all the way to the top 35 projects selected. She then went on to be one of the top 10. She was 4 TV series were chosen. Hers was one, and hers was the very first greenlit production with Netflix, who were so excited about her concept of 4 young girls who have superpowers and are able to save the world on a budget from the city of Lusaka in Zambia. Little did she know that her very quick submission would lead to this series that's not only making the world feel more normal, having young girl characters and leads as heroes shaping their own lives. It was very important to us to have an authentic writer's room, and that meant having women of color write on that first season. Hopefully there are more to come. There are no women who write, there's hardly any women who write in animation, and no women of color at that point in 2017. And so we went to find these women. So her one story, her one set of characters impacted change. And we found 750 women applied with samples. Sorry, I'm trying to make this quick. And we were able to choose 8 fantastic new writers who currently today are still writing and pitching their own projects. 70% of them are pitching projects in animation. Her one story, her one chance to do this has been the catalyst for such change. And I know that it's a female-centered TV series and an all-female writer's room and a very key crew are all-female. And it's one storyline, and it speaks to women rising up. But I think it just is a great example of how one story can bring that change.
Amazing. Yeah, and I also think one of the things I took away from that story is how powerful it can be to have someone encourage you. Because if she hadn't had that friend said, are you crazy? You have to apply, that story wouldn't exist, right? And we heard that many times throughout the morning as well, the importance of supporting and encouraging, especially for women that struggle with the imposter syndrome. I'm not ready, I'm not perfect, right? Because we've been told we need to be perfect. And so to have our friends and our community and our mentors say, no, you're ready, you need to do this is absolutely powerful.
I have to add to this because the story just gets more spicy. The writer's room and the workshop was so exceptional because it was this wonderful feminine space of just emotions and like, I don't know if I'm ready for this and I don't know if I'm worthy of this, but you are. And working with these women so closely, it wasn't a typical writer's room, it was a phenomenal journey with them. 2 of them have gone on to direct their first short films in an anthology with Disney+. And they never thought, well, I had an opportunity to direct animation. And this is literally, 4 years later. It can be done. So I love talking about stories and case studies because I think each and every one of us is in a place where we can impact change. And it doesn't take a lot. It really just takes that encouragement and a support and an idea and money to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have an anecdote they'd like to share?
Not an anecdote per se, but I just want to say that Story Lab for Disney was truly a light bulb moment. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving because all of the participants in the program learned so much from it, and it seems that every other year another one gets their pitches into production, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I will say that I think that program was what helped launch actually Stories by Women, the program I'm talking about today, because it truly was, Vanessa said we had over 1,000 applicants. That showcased us the talent, the ideas. They are out there. We just need to really create those opportunities and access for people to gain these experiences. And we realize that mentorship is very important, connections are important, and also funding, right? You have to trust people with their ideas and say, okay, I have faith in you. What support can we give you? What experts can we put you in touch with that'll help make this idea a reality? So I will thank you, Vanessa, and the Triggerfish team for helping us realize that and helping cause the Stories by Women program that we're here to talk about.
It's like you read my mind, because that was my next question.
I'll keep the mic.
No, I think it's really phenomenal, and I think something that you said that we spoke to earlier with Miles, he's pointed out, like, you need to trust the creatives, right, that you're looking to. This is not we have the funding, we're going to tell you what to do. But you really leaned in and said, yeah, you know what you need. We trust you. We're going to give you the support to do that. So that's fantastic.
Oh, exactly. And our delegates who are here today, I've seen a couple of them in the room, have absolutely blown us away. For the Stories by Women program, what we realize is these amazing ideas exist, but sometimes it's about getting them to pitch-ready level. How do you get them to a state where people who are at this conference can listen to these pitches and say, okay, I want to take this on? A lot of times those resources don't exist, especially in emerging markets, to train people. I mean, we had a lovely woman earlier who talked about approaching animation in her 40s, and someone asked her to pitch when she was here for the first time. She's like, I've never done a pitch before, right? It could be something as basic as that, just really training people with the tools on how to deliver confidently your story and really give yourself the best opportunity. So for the past few weeks, we've actually been training our delegates on how to prep their pitches. We've been setting up meetings for them to meet with people at this conference and really just showcasing to them, we're just here, honestly, as a support system. We'll help you make all of these connections, but your stories are incredible. As you said, we have faith in you. Go on and tell them, right? We're just facilitating that process and here for whatever you need.
I'm curious. I mean, I know for Stories by Women, mentorship was a key component, and you spoke to that earlier. I'm wondering if other folks, and I know that the mentorship is a big part of your various programs. I'm looking at you, Delphine. Do you want to speak a little bit about the importance of mentorship in the program, some stories behind that?
Well, first I'm going to say that they finally arrived.
Raise your hand. Where are you? Yay. From LFA. Wonderful. Go talk to them. They have pitches.
Can you tell me the question again? I'm sorry.
Just the importance of mentoring. I know that's a big part of your program as well.
In LFA, we have two mentoring programs. One, which we called it the classic mentorship, that we try to follow about 25 women each year want to change in their career, or primo people who just finished their studies and who arrived in a career and who need confidence and try to get in the animation world. So we follow them during, I'm sorry, I'm the only one who is not speaking so well English. Huh? And so we do that I think we've done that for 6 years now, or 5 years now. And we have this new program this year, which is called The Woman's Journey. And so which follows 6 projects coming from France and Africa. And it's a project, short film project made by duos, one graphic author and one script writer, and who hasn't done an animation school and who doesn't have any network in animation. And the idea was to give them the opportunity to put a foot in the industry, and we want to give them the keys of the market, and to show us that it's possible. And it's funny because when you showed me some of the questions earlier, you told me, tell me something you didn't expect, something, and you know what? Nothing, finally, because I was so surprised in 6 months, the work they did. Means most of them are not from animation, all of them are not from animation at all. Some write books for children, some work in other fields. And now, I mean, they're going to pitch on Wednesday morning, and it's professional. And so I would say that's the unexpected things, that we have to believe in ourselves because they succeed. Then we'll see if the films are done, but at least the first step is done.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just the power of sourcing that raw talent. The beautiful stories can come out of this, right? And people that you wouldn't have expected because they're not even in the industry. Yeah. So, Miles, I'm curious from you. I know that for Epic Games, education is a huge part of what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about why that feels so important to you?
First of all, I'm going to start off and say I'm kind of an elder statesman. in technology. And one thing that I want to impress, because I know that there are storytellers here, and there are probably people who also animate and do that work. And one thing I want to say here is that we're at the beginning of a precipice of something I've never seen before. And and everything that has been said here, agree with 100%. But also, if you lay on top of that, right now, there's something that's happening in technology with real-time workflows, which is democratizing how things are being done. You don't have to pay for the software. You don't have to pay for assets. There are all these things that are there. And then there's a lot of, I know from our point of view, education, it's free. Like, you can go, we have programs that are there. Through the pandemic, we were actually paying people in order to learn these new workflows. And so I think that, when I hear people talking about giving pitches, for example, I think for about maybe the next 2 years, we're going to have this difference where you're going to have some people who are going to come into their pitches with animation, with what it actually is going to look like. And that's something that usually it's a verbal pitch, it's a deck or something like that. And one thing I would say is I've seen this happen before in lesser scale. And what happens is sharp elbows come out. People start elbowing people out of the way and things like that. And it winds up being the same people telling the same stories. Let's not let that happen right now. There's a lot of resources that are out there. Everyone here is talking about resources, and there are more. And let's take advantage of those resources so that we can truly democratize across the board who's telling stories, because there are amazing stories out there that aren't the same churn of the same stories by the same people over and over and over again. And that has me incredibly excited.
Yeah, that's worth clapping for. I think one of the other things that I sort of, as you were talking, I was thinking about, we were talking about barriers at the beginning, and you were talking about starting really from a very young age. And I think especially as we advance in technology, that's a huge barrier for women, right? I mean, it's amazing what happens even in those very early years. And so to be offering that education, again, Vani spoke to this. She said, I didn't want to do the technology. That was intimidating. I'm a creator. I don't do technology. And now she's like, no, Unreal Engine, I got this. So I think that is absolutely, it's another way to break down those barriers and giving them the confidence that they can. Absolutely. So earlier, Delphine, you said you learned something unexpected. Or that you sort of didn't know what to expect. But I'm curious from other folks, was there something that came out of the programs that you developed that you didn't expect? Something unexpected, yeah.
So when I started working with the folks at the studio, I was really pleasantly surprised by the reaction I got from the men. Now, maybe they were just trying to make sure they don't get fired, because we said if we don't have enough women by 2025 to make it 50-50, some of you guys are going to go. But one of the components of the program is really a collaborative method. And when I talk about communications and leadership training, it's not just for women. It's a class where both men and women attend. And their enthusiasm and their buy-in was very impressive, and I was surprised because, I'm an old fart, at least in their eyes, and I thought there would be some resistance. The challenge that I faced was that while they were willing, their hearts were open, their minds were shaped by their own, they're in their own prisons, they're living in their own prisons of their upbringing, their thought process. And so helping men break their barriers is as important as helping women break their barriers. It's almost like it's two worlds. And
it's worth the clap. Yes.
And that was very heartwarming as well. And we talked about education, having access to education. that was also something really surprising to me, how many people, how many women really wanted to get in the industry. I did not know that. But as I started talking to the people in the studio, I have someone that I know. I have someone that I know. Is it a girl? Is it a girl? Yes, it's a girl, as if we don't matter, you know. But that is also something very surprising. And because of that, we're actually going to be opening an academy in Kathmandu for the whole region. And I've said I'm going to have 1,000 graduates by like 2023. And I want a job for each and every one of them. And so anybody over here that's in production will have people ready for you, and you're going to make an impact in people's lives that like you've never imagined. And I see this every day. And Miles, we should connect, because if you want to teach Unreal Engine, we actually have a need within our studio, but that's very me, right? But apart from that, well, sometimes I crack a smile and I make it mine. But at the Academy, we'd just love to have some sort of a collaboration, because yes, free education in any way would be really helpful. Yes.
Amazing.
One other thing that I'm hearing here, though, also is where are the safe spaces, right? And in a creative, and I know for myself, I work in a highly technical organization. Games can be very brutal, and with a lot of developers that, they have their own culture, their own ways of going about things. And I'm not saying that I have any solution for this at all, other than we need to set up safe spaces for people to be able to create the way they want to create. And I think a lot of times we tend to do things from a different perspective of okay, well, we want to get into this club. And again, what I'm hearing from what you guys are talking about is setting up our own clubs, our own groups of people who we can safely express our stories, safely express the technical skills that we have, and feel like it's with common people who are allowing us to fail, really. And because that's what this is all about. You go into a story, you fail, and you learn from that until you have a masterful piece. And so that's the other thing that I just want to acknowledge and also encourage.
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad that you said that, because, we're talking about sourcing talent from the outside, right? But then what happens when you get them there? And as we've seen, there's this idea of like, oh, we'll just get them there and they'll be fine. And I think Julianne talked about it earlier about can they boogie? Do you play their song, right? And if you don't create that space, you lose them. And then what happens? You'll say, well, that didn't work, so we're just not going to try it anymore, right? But what are you doing in your studios to create that space? I'm so glad that you said that, because it's not going to just the one side is not going to work. Absolutely.
I just want to say I love this conversation that we are having about giving people the space to fail. As someone who works with a lot of underrepresented minorities on different creative processes, I feel like there's this pressure to never fail. And if you do, you are letting down your entire race or culture, et cetera. I was recently talking to someone who's working on an African production, and he said, he's like, I honestly feel so stifled right now, because I am one of the only ones creating this type of content in my country. And if I don't get it right, what does that mean for others who want to come after me, right? So I think one thing that we're really trying to push is create this kind of global lessons learned from other countries. So a lot of creators, we realize, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia are facing those same challenges, right? The pressures to get it right from the first try. So I love hearing people say that, no, it's okay to not get it right. It's all a learning process. And, as minorities, there are often burdens on minorities to kind of be that one person representing everyone. And I think someone said earlier, that can only be changed if we have more people in the room who look like that minority. I was recently, just kind of a small pivot, but I was recently at this Miss Marvel event, and the actress who plays the mother for Miss Marvel, she said that throughout her entire 30-year journey, she would look look around sort of the rooms, and she was the only one. And on the set of Miss Marvel, she looked around, and it wasn't just her in the room. She was the room. And I thought that was so beautiful, and I think that's something that we should all aspire to.
All right, Sajda, you're going to make me do a little tearing up. Don't do that. I'm the moderator. Absolutely. Yes, please.
So the discussion is on safe space from a creative perspective. But me, being a non-creative person, I can't even draw a circle. So, but I do have a very thought on safe spaces. For women, a lot of times, you're held to a higher standard. And when there's a project that requires working overtime, maybe accommodating her, right? Not letting her handle the toughest of tasks. So a lot of times we are sidelined, bypassed, stepped over, and we're left behind. So one of the things I feel very strongly about any program that is serious about retaining women in the workforce, be it animation or anything else, is strictly enforcing a code of conduct or some variation of that. At my studio, I formulated a code of conduct policy, and I went about encouraging people to file complaints with HR if they felt like, they were just not treated right. So that's a way of opening the door for women to voice their concern and grievances in a fair, equitable manner. And I feel that that is extremely important. Otherwise, you're not putting your money where your mouth is. And I feel very strongly about a code of conduct policy in a corporate setting. So just had to get it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if there are other sort of successes that you feel like, if everyone was doing this, the world would be so much better.
Just to pivot on something that you were saying, just about making things a safe space and making sure that there's a code of conduct that's in place. I think once you've had an opportunity to experience, be on a project, produce whatever it is, and the project happens to not do as well as you'd hoped, and what I've been surprised by is women have really taken that as a huge knock, and to bounce back from that knock has been something that I've seen in the workplace, and that I've been surprised by. But I get it. I've experienced it, and I think just to encourage. Talk about the safe space is really just to make sure there's a support team to make sure that those women bounce back with even more moxie, and really give it, and not just stop at that one sort of failure. Failure I use in little inverted commas, but so that's something I really believe in. One thing just to your question now, Jenna. Gosh, I'm a huge advocate for this. And unless we're actually putting our money where our mouth is, I don't think we're going to see change. I don't think that content will be created as the world is today, representative of the world today. And I've been so encouraged by huge giants like Netflix and Disney, who have made it policy to make sure that there are accelerator programs attached to productions, new original shows. Mama K's is an example of that with Netflix, and the Kazazimoto Generation Fire, the African anthology, 10 new directors for the first time doing their first animated short film, going through a masterclass to support them in directing, and a team to support them make this film so that they do well. I think those are just amazing expressions of putting your money into people, and the production will follow, and it will be a success. If the money's not spent on these accelerator programs, these skills development programs, and making sure the room is representative, I honestly don't think we're taking it seriously, and I don't think we'll see change. So I'm really encouraged by the big giants that are doing this. At lunchtime, somebody mentioned about Disney TVA making sure that there was a percentage of spend on every single budget that was dedicated to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in that production. I'm like, hallelujah, that's fantastic. It's so important. It's not a luxury. It should be an absolute necessity that big gatekeepers of these productions sign off and make sure that there are clear DEI goals on every single production. And I'm a huge believer of apprenticeships, that creative crew go through the process and get a successful opportunity to be on production and have that experience behind them. It takes money, but yeah, I'm a firm believer of that.
Yeah, and it's like you knew what I was going to ask, because I didn't actually give her that setup. But I'm thinking about the video from Incessant Rain, and I loved when Kiran Joshi said, gender justice is everyone's fight. I mean, that just felt so powerful, right? And I'm wondering, where is he? Thank you. So I'm wondering what you would say to people in the room, people that are watching, that are considering supporting programs like this or creating programs like this to support gender inclusion. What's that oomph that you want to give them to say, yes, do it? I'm looking at whoever wants to start. Miles?
Maybe a little bit of a that just struck me, what we were talking about here, because it still seems like we're trying to fit into something else that isn't run by and so there's this problem that we're not talking about, which again is this thing of you have to fit into this group over here. And so I was on a call when we were talking about increasing the numbers of diverse people within a program that we had. Mm-hmm. And so I took it upon myself to go in and say, everybody, we want to do this. Can you please reach out into your network? And then something jumped into my head, and it was a primarily white group of men who I was talking to. And my point was, if you can't put someone up for this, then you have to look at yourself.
Yes.
And because I think it's always someone else's problem. It's always us needing money in order to do something. And so what I would just say to anybody who wants to kind of hold their organization to account is actually to say, everyone needs to make sure that they expand their own network. Mm-hmm. And if they can't find those people in their LinkedIn, they have personal work to do. So I know that's a little pivot, but I just...
No, it's exact. No, yes. No, I mean, I think 100% is so powerful. Yeah.
I really agree with you. Saying go to your network is not going to really improve, right? Anything. I think, you know how when we were kids and our teachers want us to know who's right next to each other. Hey, say hello to the right and the person to your left. I think that's what we need to do. Our networks are our networks. So, you know, they're going to kind of reflect who we are and where we're from. One of the things that I really believe that corporate America needs to do is set up an example, and it doesn't really do it. One of the things Kiran and I talked about, I was not involved actively until recently, and I could have gone in as a chief operating officer, right? Good position, leadership. I would have done everything that I'm doing right now. And he was like, you know what? You should be the co-CEO. If you really want to do this in a country like Nepal, you should be the co-CEO. Equal position, and of course, as a company, it works well. He's the creative, wacky guy, and I'm the really boring person that takes care of everything else.
Oh, we like operations. I'm an operator. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, for the creatives, yeah, they're like way there. But I believe that there's a lot of goodwill in corporate America, for sure. Lots of programs, for sure. But I feel like it's an iceberg. We see the tip. I'm glad there's a tip. But there's a whole lot that we don't see in corporate policy, corporate mandates. I would like to see big studios have women of diverse backgrounds in true leadership positions. And maybe I'm a negative Nelly. I'm just always squinting my eyes to see what's the real thing, what's between the lines. And I don't really see that, to be honest with you. It's much better, but any degree of better is not really better. It's got to be a significant degree of better to make it better. Because as a human being, as a species, we should be at a better position than we are right now. And so when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we need to be a little bit more aggressive. People who are making policies need to almost think like revolutionaries, while when we execute, we need to be evolutionaries. I don't know if that makes sense. I just make stuff up, But I think that's where we need to be really effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would say the most important for all of us is to give another education to our kids and to the small ones. And for example, if I come back to our program, we got inspired by in French, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, this Nigerian author, wrote a book which is called a Manifesto for Feminist Education. And for me, she almost should have called it for feminist education, but for an inclusive education. And I think that's our job to try to educate and to open the source to all the girls and boys, because I think it's important to have this parity and egalitarian society. Okay, I don't know what I want to say else, but...
I think for gender inclusion too, and Stories by Women actually recognizes this in our application as a limitation, is our application was in English. And if we're talking about inclusion, we can't just stick to one language. We have to go beyond and do better. So we recognize that. If you look at our guidelines, we say in a footnote, we apologize for this. It truly was a timeline issue. We only had a few months to put together this incredible program. But we say we will do better next year. And that's a commitment that we put on ourselves. I think that we have to think about languages of French, Spanish, Arabic, right? Because there's so many diverse stories out there. And truly learning English in a lot of markets is a privilege, right? It takes a certain group to have that access and to sort of build that language repertoire. So that's something we want to do. To all of you, anyone working on gender programs, think beyond the English-speaking countries and English-speaking people, because there are so many incredible folks out there who would jump at opportunities like this if it was offered in a different language.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a note that we made this year, right? I mean, and you go back to funding, right? You don't want to use that as an excuse all the time, but there are barriers, and so it's looking at being able to speak up about that. And I think the power of saying, okay, we didn't do that well, we will do better next time, right? I think that's a very powerful statement for programs, either bringing people in or supporting them as they go throughout. For sure. So I think we're getting close to the end. So I'm going to, before I open up to Q&A, I'm going to ask, I think, the most fun question ever for programs like yours. If you had an unlimited budget, what additional elements would you add to your program? Thinking of all those things that we want to do. I'm going to look at you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think beyond the language and component, which of course via translators, et cetera, my background is actually in development. I used to work at USAID and specifically on gender empowerment programs. And what we found is whenever you're building a program, you have to think about sustainability. Beyond the 1 year mark, what does it look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 10 years? So I think if I had unlimited funding, I would love to support the delegates for longer, right? Because this short time period is not truly enough time to get them to where we would want them to be and set them up for true success. So if we could make this a 2-3 year program, have them as delegates until their work is in production and support them beyond, offer that mentorship, offer that guidance, I would love that. So that's what I would
funding,
do.
Folks.
Exactly.
That's where it's at as a nonprofit professional. Multi-year funding.
I love that we have this festival in France, and as a South African, I often look at the French state support, and I'm so jealous because there's such an amazing opportunity to make art and to experiment and to try many, many times. And I just feel like there's so many emerging markets that don't have that privilege. So shorts programs, encouraging the arts programs and actually giving creators of all ages from all backgrounds an opportunity to create with no pressure to make business. You know, a lot of triggerfish is decisions are often about, well, we need to keep the lights on and we need to pay crew. And that's so difficult. I wish we could just experiment and create without the pressure of business. So if there was unlimited funds for any sort of incubator program, I would say it would be to actually create. So you're writing, you're producing, you're directing, you're art directing, and you continue doing that for long term. And having the experience, you can then go into and pitch yourself in the industry, feeling way more confident than just your first time, your first film. So much pressure riding on you. Yeah, that's what I do.
So I think we have time for one more, and then we'll do just a couple questions from the audience.
I would start very young, and I would follow it all the way through, because there are a lot of people who do have. Yes, I am. But I think there are a lot of people who have privilege that feel that they're swimming, but they're really going down lazy river, and they're easing from one to another. And then there's another group of people who are swimming upriver, and each opportunity they just about drown, and they're not going to make it to too many. I want to turn that river around, and I want to make it so that you start young and there's always a path, but multiple paths to get somewhere. So, and really systemically think about it and make sure that we're capturing all of those people so that we don't have to have these conversations anymore, and that it can just be the way it is.
I love the idea of not having to have these conversations because it's all figured out, right? Absolutely. So I think we have time for a couple questions if we want to have anyone come up. Go ahead.
Hi, your program seems to be directed to individuals who want to have a career in animation and go and work at big studios. But I was curious to know if your programs would be open to helping smaller production companies who are women-led and who are struggling to get the funding that they need in order to tell the stories.
Yes. So the Mega Grant program is all about that. Just to be clear, we're a games company, so to be honest, I mean, I come from film and television, but the company itself doesn't quite understand what, it's a big company, I'm helping this big. That's not the way we approach it. So absolutely, the Mega Grants program is something that is set up for that.
Thank you.
I'd love to just jump in. I mean, as a producing studio from the continent, and we work with so many amazing African talent, yes, we'd love to, but we ourselves are just trying to keep going and to grow as a business. But I think when big partners come on board and want to create a unique story from diverse talent, then they should look at also supporting local studios. But it requires way more money because those studios have maybe 10 people and have been in commercials all these years to survive. So it requires a little bit more of a visionary mentality coming into that, and a bit more budget to kick that off and to give that studio an opportunity. There's a 2D studio in South Africa, Johannesburg, called The Hidden Hand, and they had an opportunity to do cleanups on Primal on season 2. And what an amazing opportunity for a 2D studio to work on a TV series of that level, and need more opportunities like that, where that studio gets to thrive and they continue hiring, and we all get to grow and flourish as an industry. So I know I always feel like I point back to big gatekeepers to open up funds and for these opportunities, but it feels like that because we are restricted with finance.
I just want to add, we're doing this very creative project right now in Africa called Nat Geo Kids Africa. It's basically bringing National Geographic Kids to African children, and it's really fantastic because you have these, I think they're like 10, 11, 12 sort of pioneers in environmental issues leading you on these expeditions and talking about environmental concerns in their communities. And one thing we did is we picked a production studio to help us create it, but there was another studio who was fantastic, but they just weren't quite at the skill level set that we were looking at. So we brought them in as kind of a shadow studio. They're creating a behind-the-scenes portfolio, which is fantastic because it gives them that type of experience that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And it also allows us to build talent in a country and region that we're really targeting for future programming. So that's just one thing that we're doing to be a bit more creative about it and support smaller productions.
Great. Thank you. We have time for, yes, go ahead. Oh, wait, actually, hold it. You've got the mic already.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
You'll be the last one.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. I'm one of the Stories by Women delegates, by the way. I just wanted to say, Miles, I agree with you about how the technology is changing the way that we are able to create our own projects and access all of that. Last year, I got some funding from the South African government, and I created a residency program, virtual residency, to help 5 filmmakers make their own short films. One of them is here. She's my employee now. And we were able to do that because there's Zoom and there's Google and there's YouTube tutorials, and we teach ourselves things all the time. So I just wanted to ask you, how open are you to collaborating with smaller entities like my company in South Africa, to be able to learn things like Unreal Engine, because we're a 2D studio, we don't do 3D, and so that we can gain those skills so that we can then work with people overseas with interesting pipelines. Thank you.
So the structure is actually set up that way, where there's a badging system. It's free. You can go and you can actually do self-serve instruction that will take you up. There's also instruction where we do larger group classes. So, and again, all of this stuff is really free and out there and readily available. So we are, to be honest, on the virtual production end of things, this really just started in 2019 in many ways of this really kind of taking off. So we're really early in the process. But, you know, my intention really, and it's not all up to me, but I'm that voice in the room that says, I want to be able to reach where everyone can ultimately do self-serve, but they can build their own groups and communities where they can also help one another. So we have efforts along the line. You're going to see, I think it might be out now, a forum type thing. And in this forum is everyone. And what I mean by that is you're going to have people, like, because it's so new, there are people who are just getting going, but there are also people who have been doing this for 20 and 30 years. They're all in this space, and I'm starting to see this exchange of information happening just because people are excited about what's going on. So self-serve learning is out there. I'd be happy to talk to you about that kind of stuff, and then also the forums and things like that. I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. We have time. One more question here. Last one.
Oh, sorry.
Hello. My question is about the diversity. We're talking about different types of diversity, but really rare people talk about neural diversity, and that people's brains work differently, especially in creative communities. There are people with ADHD, autism, and plenty of others. Are your companies do any kind of also awareness or adaptations to people with different needs? Because the problem is most of companies expect you to be neurotypical in order to get a job. You need to organize your portfolio in a certain way. You need to have usually works of one style. And if you have 20 styles, you usually don't fit that much. So I was curious if there is any kind of work done on this. And for example, asynchronized communication, is it implemented or not? That's it. I will clarify. Like, for example, if there is a person with ADHD who cannot focus on a conference or your brainstorming, can they see a video later and give their ideas to you in a written form or somehow else, so they can adapt to the way you work and bring their impact of their divergent thinking?
I mean, I'll just speak. We are a developer community, and I do find, and this is just my personal observation, I don't want to speak on behalf of the company necessarily, but I do see it a lot. And actually within the community, where I see quite a few, different styles of people who are either communicating, as you said, if we're just talking about the communication part of it, through Slack, being able to go back to meetings, being able to, or in person. So that's one thing. And then, yes, I am absolutely seeing people who are on the spectrum are really embraced in many ways for what they're doing, at least within my company. And I've also seen, actually, there's an organization out of Los Angeles and I'm drawing a blank on
Exceptional Minds.
Exceptional
Yes.
Minds. And I know we gave a mega grant to them as well here recently, and it's phenomenal, the work that they're doing. I think there should be more groupings where, because that is it's easy to engage with that group because you understand how to communicate with them, with that organization. You understand kind of, okay, here's the kind of rules of engagement. It's easy to engage. When it's a one-on-one, it can be a little bit more difficult within an organization. I'm just pointing out like really what some of the challenges are.
Well, thank you for the answer. I just think that it can bring a lot of new stories and really creative approaches.
Yeah, and I think I'll go back to what Julianne started us off with, is that all of this is connected, right? So people of underrepresented genders come in all types. And everything that we're talking about here in terms of inclusion counts for all these different types of people. And I think there's a real power, too, in having groups that are very diverse come together. You said look to your left, look to your right, who's in your network. As you build that network and it becomes more diverse, you start having these conversations. You're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. You know, I can speak to a lot of examples, but I'm the moderator, so I won't. But I just think there's a real power in having these collaborative, diverse conversations. So you can ask that question and they'll say, oh, I didn't even think about that. So thank you. Absolutely. So I think that is it for us. That was our last question. And I'm going to pass it over to Julianne. Please give our folks a round. We don't have time, unfortunately. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Another round of applause for this amazing panel and discussion. So we're going to transition now to another two videos that are going to conclude our videos for the day, which are the final two of the case studies you just heard about in that panel. So we're just going to learn a little bit more about our last two partners here, and then we'll move on to the last panel, which is moderated by me. So I will introduce myself. So stay tuned, and we'll be back on stage shortly for a discussion to wrap up our day. All right? Here we go to the videos.
What would you like your network to know about the Caribbean in animation?
Well, first of all, I'd like them to know that we currently have quite a number of people trained that are able to really jump into action very quickly to be involved with animation production. The people of the Caribbean have always been very creative. The general standard of education is very high. Everyone can communicate in English. It's very close to the United States, where a lot of the major studios are. So the time zones are convenient, also for Canada, South America. And Europe has a very strong connection to the Caribbean. So it's very intuitive that they would want to work with studios and individuals to be able to complete their productions.
What do you see, like for instance, in 5 years for Tap Factory?
Well, first of all, Tap Factory is a high-quality, well-outfitted destination for learning and for studios to get started. We have great people teaching. I see the Tap Factory becoming a beacon for other evolving geographies. And I think the Tap Factory is really going to be a beacon and an example as to how it can be done properly.
TAP has been a guiding light for me when things were getting difficult, not only during the COVID epidemic, but long before.
As animators and visual storytellers, we're able to create something that brightens someone's day or make something that's really productive and, do something that really shows our talent and our growth.
Even through the darkest times, that creativity and passion can pretty much shine through.
I attend TAP virtual groups because not only do I get to learn about animation, but I also get to have a community.
Such an overwhelming sense of support and sense of community.
I attend virtual TAP groups to be able to express my creativity.
That's what I do. It's lit. Chillin'. Facts.
I am so grateful for TAP's flexibility, as well as them for providing us tools to excel.
So that's why, I come to the virtual group, because I find it inspiring.
Hello, everyone. If we could have a seat. Oh, microphone. Thank you so much. Hello. If everybody could make their way inside, we'll transition to the last panel of the day. Excellent. So, hi, everyone. Again, Julianne Cromit, your host of the day. And I'm very excited to have this final conversation, which I am moderating. So with that, I'd love to invite to the stage, and I think we are waiting. Are we waiting? Am I going to vamp? Okay, perfect. We're taking a quick restroom break, so I'm going to just make things up as I stand up here. Everyone, who has been here for the afternoon thus far and just stayed around? Fantastic. Wonderful. Just because I'm going to do a little audience interaction, is what has stuck out to you today? Is there something somebody said, something top of mind that has just resonated with you today? That's a phrase, or maybe something that you're thinking about, oh, I can go do this right now when I leave today. Something, anybody? Oh, right there, fabulous. Stand up, yeah. And I love your hair too. Thank you. Yes, and I'll repeat back to you, yeah. No worries. Mm. Yes. That's absolutely right. So I'll just repeat back what you said, is that this idea of engaging men in the conversation consistently and the opportunity and responsibility that lies in that, because if you're only engaging women or those who are an underrepresented gender, then you're not actually talking about the whole equation, and that there's tremendous opportunity in that, and also necessity in that, because otherwise you're just doing damage control, as you said, as opposed to looking sort of forward and how are we changing the whole system, right, that has privileged masculinity, right, or men. Is that a fair? Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much. with that, the panel is here, and I'd love to invite the fabulous Maria, Chris, and Janine to join me on stage. And we're going to wrap up the day today with a conversation kind of tying a few of the themes together. So, all right, you all are coming? Wonderful. And I'm just going to keep holding the same mic. So hi, everyone. How you doing? It's been an amazing day, yeah? I'd love to start us off. You know, I'm not going to have anybody do like bios and all that because we're just going to waste time with questions. Yes, you're welcome, Chris. But I'd love to sort of start us off reflecting back on today. You know, I just asked the question of the audience. We had an amazing response of something that sort of stuck out for you today. I'd love to have each of you reflect on what's one theme or takeaway from the conversations that we've had thus far today that have really stuck out for you, or maybe created an aha moment for you around gender justice that you're going to take back into your own organizations. And Maria, I'll start with you because I see your head nodding already.
This was not on the pre-prepped questions, so I don't really understand what's going on. No, I'm just kidding. So I've actually been really sitting with thinking about this from an international context. I think that what is really incredible about being in this space with kind of all of the different people here and meeting some of these amazing creatives from all over the world is really starting to look at what are the structural barriers, what are the systemic issues that we have towards actually making stories from all over the world for them to have access to our platforms and to our spaces. And I think that it just feels really apparent that there is a lot that can be done, and that's kind of an area of real energy and opportunity. And so it's kind of exciting to see that there's so much talent and so many stories out there, but that there's so much work to do to really provide that access. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, for me, it's just kind of talk about just the barriers. I know it was, most of us seem to be from a US-centric point of view, and having, moved to Amsterdam about 2 years ago and seen the world from a different perspective, I've come to realize that, gender discrimination is universal. The systemic cultural barriers, just family barriers, they're all the same. And I think, we have to put more thought into help, individuals from underrepresented groups get over those barriers that are specific to who they are.
Absolutely. Janine?
I think for me, in the panel beforehand, somebody said like change agents, and I thought like that was a very powerful and very good word. And also the continuity to really follow it through and find models that we don't only have these one programs and then go off, but that we really have programs that's sustainable and sustain a longer term. And we see that. I mean, there was also shared the program of Triggerfish and Disney and with Malanga, and that felt like really good that she is, that also the Writers' Room now is involved in different other projects, and how that can continue. How can they also go beyond the short form, but then also be involved in their big thing? And like these continuity and this long-term engagement, that is something that I felt like was very powerful beforehand.
Absolutely. I think really interesting things you all bring up, which is sort of a global perspective, the idea of that barriers actually exist sort of globally, and in many ways there's a lot of similarity between them and the way they play out. And this idea around consistency, Janine, and the long game that you were talking about. And I think that sort of brings us to this. It's actually funny, all three of the themes you hit on kind of bring us to our final conversation today. So our goal out of this is to try to actually wrap up some of the themes and learnings and pieces that we've taken today together with you, so that we can move forward from today with maybe some sort of individual or collective plan of action, something that you can actually walk out of here today and take with you. That's our goal out of the conversation that we're about to have. And that it really is about solving something that's right in front of us, which I'm going to ask you all about in just a second, in terms of the labor shortage and the opportunity that exists with that. But it's also this question of sustainability. How do we really think about this in the long term? And I know that WIA is committed to it in the long term, and we will continue to be with you all. But how can we do that in concert? So I think that's the real question we want to get out of today's conversation. So I'm so excited. I know it's hot in here. We've got the AC going, everyone. So we've been promised the room will cool down. So just know that we're aware and conscious. I see the fanning. Yes. a lot of folks have talked about today, and we all know this, and in this room, I actually led off with a reflection of everything going on in the world right now. We are in a moment of deep paradigm shift, and the opportunity, the real opportunity actually, to intentionally shift the needle toward inclusive hiring, right? And the culture and the industry that we're trying to build, right? Including the intersections pretty much of every identity, again, because we are multitudes, right? So what have you seen, each of you seen, playing out in sort of the broader global marketplace when it comes to hiring and talent development? And I'm actually going to start with Chris about some of the work you've been doing with Grow, and also sort of just your broader reflections on what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I've been in the business for 26 years, you know, in the last 2.5, you know, looking at around the world. And my job is basically to figure out how to grow a global workforce to support all the content that all these huge companies are making. I mean, I'm gonna get at the risk of being hyperbolic here. I mean, never before in the history of personkind have we told this many stories or pumped this many billions of dollars into entertaining the world, as we like to say. And the fact is, we don't have enough skilled talent to create this content and then produce this content. So never before has there been so many opportunities in this business for people around the world. So for us, you know, given, I don't want to say power, but given that opportunity to make a difference in building the workforce, I'd like to avoid what happened in Hollywood, where we're trying to retrofit the industry and diversify it so they can make stories for the next generation of, you know, viewers, and build a workforce that starting off already with an inclusionary lens. That's going to be, that's going to have the talent and the storytellers above and below the line to tell those stories that I think everyone wants to see. So basically, we have executives in about 15 countries that are kind of our top priorities, that are, their jobs are to figure out how to create pipelines, to tap into the local talent pools, give them access to the information in terms of, you know, writing, or whether you're a line producer, or, you know, or a production accountant, and then give them opportunities on our productions to start their careers. And then we also have, you know, one strategy where to find that talent that already exists and then elevate what they already know so they can make the content at the level that the major media companies are looking for.
Awesome. Janine, how are you seeing this in sort of the development world and sort of creative exec world?
I think actually, I mean, for Netflix speaking, most of our audience doesn't come from the US. So basically we want to tell these stories that everyone can see themselves on the screen and reflect themselves. And as Chris said, we have executives around the world. So you can also walk into a room where you can talk to a room that represents you, that has the same heritage, that speaks your language, that you don't need to pitch in English, for example, and that you can actually tell the story that you want to tell, and that it comes across as you also, as it feels probably easier for you instead of coming in a room and doing something in English, like for me now, which is also not my first language. So giving these opportunities and being really right at the center there and being right there, and then clearly speaking for animation, we want to have these global series and films, etc. In especially probably in the kids field. But still, I mean, that is actually an execution thing, and still coming from a story point and making that very specific and cultural heritage really specific, that is for us very important. And I think actually giving the access to all these different offices and being there and being represented there is for us very important.
Fantastic. And Maria, if you can share a little bit about what's going on at Disney and sort of in the broader landscape as you're seeing it too.
Yeah, I'll talk about it from like a domestic, like US first, and then kind of international programming. You know, at Disney, we're starting to launch 2 new animation studios in addition to the legacy animation studios, which is Walt Disney Animation, Pixar. Now there's Lucas and Marvel that have also started animation studios. And there's talent that we're going to be, that we're continuously bringing into the studio. And one of the things that has been amazing about COVID is it's accelerated the process for people to be able to work on productions from anywhere in the world, which I think is really incredible because it means that we can actually access and tap into talent anywhere. And I think that that's something that we need to start to really think about intentionally when we're thinking about our productions and how to staff them. From a domestic lens. Internationally, as we kick off kind of our international programming content pillar, right? And there's all of these, both acquisition and development that's happening in the different regions. I think there's so much that needs to happen to the work that you're kind of doing, Chris, which is around like building ecosystems within the regions, right? Being able to understand who the players are, being able to help to elevate voices that often are completely invisible, even within region. I just came from North Africa right before this, and I met with some of the most amazing filmmakers from within that country who are not connected to anything outside of the country, but are doing incredible content within, you know, and that's the type of, I think, kind of ecosystem I would love to build is like across country, kind of like what Queen was talking about, right? It's amazing. Like with animation, you can actually work with an animation studio in Japan and in North Africa, and they could be all working on the same series, right? Like it's, so I think that seeing more of that kind of cross collaboration, cross country work, I think is also important, and connecting to these areas that are completely disconnected from kind of our network is also really important, so.
Absolutely. And I think in the spirit, you know, we've heard it kind of all today, right, to your point, which is this idea of how do we work cross-community, right, and also cross-collaboratively so we're learning from each other. None of us should be doing any of this in a vacuum. The question I posed at the beginning of the day is, if we could build the animation industry from scratch, from the beginning, today, how would we build it? What would that look like? It's an exercise because I think it starts to get us out of sort of patterning in the same way. And part of that is this notion, I think, of cross-collaboration across markets and also across language, which has been brought up a ton today. And by the way, as several of us who are multilingual up here, we totally hear that note. And stay tuned for more from WIA on that as we continue to go. But with that, when we think really specifically, I think, about this labor shortage that we're seeing in the animation industry, and Chris, to your point, I think writ large within content in many ways. What do you think are sort of the specific opportunities for jobs and job training in the animation industry? And it might also be connected to live action in some ways. Where lie the greatest areas for sort of immediate impact? And where do you think it's a sort of longer term infrastructure build? And I'll hand it to Chris first.
So I think for animation, I think there's a real opportunity for writing. There's a real opportunity for writing and live action as well, but especially in animation, one of our executives, who's really one of our passions is to accelerate, you know, animation writing in France, says we need to make writing sexy. It's just not even a career path. So if you were an animator and you learned writing, you could be a double threat. You know, you could maybe even write your own ticket. So I would really encourage all of you who are animators to really think about mastering the craft of writing, and that can give you an opportunity to get you into a writer's room on a show, learn, you know, the craft even, you know, to a deeper degree, and then maybe one day create your own show and be the master of your universe, because you'd be able to write it down versus having to, you know, have somebody else write it for you.
Absolutely. Janine, how about on your end? What are you seeing?
I think also writing and directing is the thing that is the most needed, and basically finding their ways how to also replenish this pool, to grow it and to have people work across shows, so that they can go through the full journey and then come up with their own thing. I think actually that is the biggest thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both of them said. The only thing I would add is, you know, I'm at Disney, we've had collaborations with several international studios, whether it be the Visions series that Lucas did, or whether it be kind of Iwaju and what Walt Disney Animation is working on. And I think that visual languages, being able to show different kind of like local art and being able to translate that into kind of more whatever we want to call mainstream animation, I think that is also really incredibly important and meaningful for people to be able to see themselves. So,
Absolutely. And actually building on that, and I'll toss it to Janine first, is when we think about, and it's come up actually several times today, both from the audience and from our panelists, that so much of sort of Western storytelling, by that we mean generally speaking American and European sort of storytelling, have dominated a lot of the sort of global marketplace. And that, as we've been talking about all day today, there's amazing work being done, storytellers all over the world, and that connectivity, first of all, not happening, but also the sort of opportunity and the resourcing behind that. So how do we kind of think about making stories that are not based on Western storytelling concepts, particularly in animation, and also connecting the dots for writers, for creators from around the world to sort of tell that story and also have the resources to do so?
I think the resources is a big point, basically, because at first I think it's really encouraging talent to come and share their story, come and also pitch it in their language, and not be afraid or something, but really share it. And even if the pitch is not fully formulated, come with a short pitch, come with a small pitch. We don't need full pitches and everything is thought through. We can also come from an idea and then help actually build it. And I think actually also then this building it, like giving the resources, because talents come with a certain set of experience and with a certain set of talent. And probably there is something missing or something that we can actually staff up, and basically matching that together and then coming to a full pitch, coming to the full element out of it. I think actually that is very important, that we see the ideas and grow them and help actually make them grow, and also actively take them together and give the talent the resources that the talent needs. Give trust and give also the resources and help actually make that show, that project.
Absolutely. I think a part of that too, and some of us have offsided on this in different ways, is the element of risk and the perception of risk in that decision making. We have not talked about this explicitly today, but it's very important, which is that things that are viewed right, not necessarily in Western canon, especially when most of the people in charge of greenlighting things identify, usually, right? Why, what can we do when we think about this, of this mitigation of either actual or perceived risk, and maybe how you will have seen that play out either successfully or not, as folks are thinking here of making the argument or trying to make change in the way that projects or storytellers are perceived, right? Like what will sell, what will not sell, et cetera. Yeah.
I think also having talents that also are able to help grow, and there's so many, but there's also some that need more leadership, more traineeship. But it's a new skill actually that you need. As if you have, if you partner somebody together, then you need also that talent to help somebody basically to really nurture the idea and bring it up.
I think you have to have executives that look like, the creators that you want to work with. So they don't have to flex to understand that, oh, this is a great story. And I think that's what's kind of unique. That's unique what's going on with Netflix, just in terms of having executive teams from those countries be the buyers. They can understand, like, oh, this is a unique story for our viewers in this market, so we'll buy it. And then sometimes you can even put, you can dub another voice to it, and it'll travel to another country. But I think key is, having those executives that understand that, different, like, cultural storytelling, and then finding the right voices, and then, like you said, working with talent to help elevate emerging talent to get those those series on the air.
And I think we need to redefine what risk is. Yes. So I think that there's a real risk at telling the same stories again and again, right? Like, if we don't expand our audiences, if we don't speak to a global audience, like, what does that mean for the future of our companies, right? I think that, like, we really have to redefine what risk means. And I think there's, to speak to kind of some practical things, like, you can mitigate risk. Some of the ways that I've seen this being done is doing shorts, right, to start, being able to give especially emerging artists more of an opportunity through things like that. And then with international programming, you see the shorts programs really, sometimes it's not a huge, feature initially, right? But you're allowed to kind of start and experiment and see what works on a streaming platform, right? That's less risk. And I think that's really important. And it's a great way to start, that we've been able to start to experiment with new artists, new studios, et cetera. So
maybe not call it risk, call it discovery.
Love that. Yeah.
Oh, that's a quotable to take home, folks. We're going to change risk to discovery. Everybody write that one down. I think also, Mara, you hit on something really interesting, which is inform, right? And the ability to experiment. Vanessa, you were talking about this earlier. Like, what if folks just had the ability to make without having to think about the monetization piece right away and actually to build their skill? And Janine, it goes to what you were saying, which is how can we cultivate as opposed to it being sort of a zero-sum game. And so I think something, especially for leaders who are either watching this or engaging with WIA, something for us to think about is how can we continue to build an industry that actually gets at that notion, right? In terms of cultivation, as opposed to you have to walk in the room and have everything figured out already, which of course is already going to put a whole bunch of people at a disadvantage. Yeah. I think, Chris, you said something which I think is connected to this notion of how do we think about risk as discovery, which is when we were prepping, you said we're in the career business, not the job business. So when we think about this idea of how inclusive hiring can kind of solve toward this labor shortage, right? What do you mean by that? If you can expand a little for the audience here.
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to throw money at the problem and just say, yeah, just hire a bunch of, diverse whatever, for this role and see what happens. I think someone said it might have been Saja, she said, I wish we could invest in more time, right? And so you'll see programs where they come in for 6 months and then they're gone. They're just out there in the ether. So we work really hard to make sure that we invest in careers, meaning that we do try and stay with them for the first 3 years of their careers and try to get that retention, get them that resume. And then hopefully with that resume, they can go off and if they're great, they can still work for Netflix, but they can work for competitors, get more experience and come back to us. And we still try to track them. So it's for the stay with them for the long term and not just for a snapshot in time.
And with that, Maria, your role takes you across meetings, and Janine, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, so you both can weigh in on this, is as you're looking at animation specifically, right, what do you think it is about animation that uniquely can accelerate impact around gender justice and the conversations we've been having all day today in terms of the intersection, and also around the storytelling itself? What can it do,
Yeah, that's easy. It's the art form that lasts for decades. It's the thing that children watch and it shapes the way that they understand the world, right? I mean, all of us can think about something we saw in our childhood and now it's still with us, right? I feel so, I know because you worked on Encanto, right? I feel so strongly about that title because I think like it's so formative and so powerful and so beautiful. And I think that there's a way in which animation can really shape the world. I remember I was in Paris in December and I walked into the Disney store and I saw all of these skin tones because of Encanto, because of the consumer merchandise, right? And I had just come from another store where there was not that type of, representation in the selection. And it just made me so proud to be like, all right, this is something that we've like put out in the world. And it's not just in the animation, then it's how it lives on in publishing and consumer merchandise and all of these things. And it shapes the daily lives of children. And I think that that's just incredibly powerful and can never be underestimated.
Yeah, I think it's also what was shared earlier from Triggerfish with Malangish. I mean, there was no, Vanessa said that, you shared the story. There was no, I mean, she came also up with that story because she didn't see any heroes that looked like her, the surrounding. There was nothing actually that she felt connected with her, and she came up with a story in order to represent that. And I think that's what you said. It is actually, this is the generation of tomorrow, and we want to build them, we want to grow them, we want to give them all the tools in order to be powerful in this world, and that's what needs to be done. They need to see these role models and all the role models, and they can come from everywhere.
And I think Chris is like, no. I think the other part of it too, to put even a finer point on it, is when you think about the fact that there are folks around the world who don't even know the animation industry necessarily exists beyond consuming the stories that we're all telling, then we actually have the opportunity to tell stories that let people know that this is an industry for them, because we literally invent worlds in animation. And I think there's something really powerful. Remember, always circling back to that fundamental question, how would we design this if we could start from the beginning? Well, this is what we do every day. We design and build worlds as we want to see them inside a screen, not necessarily even as they are. And I think there's something powerful in connecting that dot to the message that we could actually send in terms of leading as an industry around this, and connecting the dots to what you both shared of even seeing yourself reflected. So with that, when you hire, it was spoken out a little bit earlier, but I'd like to put a finer point on it. One of the things that we talked about, right, is that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and that belonging is that your music is played and that you can boogie, right? So bringing it full circle. If we do our job right, all of us in this room, we're reinventing the way this works. Whole lot of other people stream into animation. But when they get here, it's not a culture or place that feels like it's playing their music. And we know that when diverse teams, empirically, come together from all different backgrounds, cultural contexts, there's a lot of fighting that can happen initially. And I mean that, like actual, what we would call creative abrasion. That's a fun word for you all, which means friction, right? In any other term, which means we don't get along right away. So as we're thinking about that, how can we equip folks, not just in this room, but who are joining us by live stream, those who are in leadership positions, to really think about that cultural shift that happens, and how, as we actually do this work of diversifying our industry, can we actually make it work better from a cultural standpoint? And so anyone jump in here, I think I'll probably hand it to Maria first. I'm seeing her nod her head.
I just nod too much.
I know, but I love it. It's a cue.
Yeah, I mean, we work across many, many productions, and there's conflict that emerges every single day. And so that's just the reality of kind of the work. And I think that for me anyway, one of the things that feels really important is being able to cultivate spaces where people feel like they have safety, they can speak, they can share who they are, they can share what their concerns are, they can get mentorship. I think I loved the lunch conversation, because I think so much of this industry is relational, and it's about social skills and, kind of how do you navigate like the unspoken roles, And so to be able to get the mentorship, to be able to have other people who can tell you this is, teach you the ropes, and how to navigate a space. I think that's all really, really crucial. I know there's folks in the room who do that work every single day, but it's just, I think there's a lot more that has to be done, I think, around building an inclusive culture and making sure. I remember one of the things that we often talk about when I'm meeting with folks at Disney is, I love to quote Brian Stevenson from Equal Justice Initiative. He does incredible work in the U.S., and he talks about proximity and the importance of being proximate to difference and to pain and things like that. And how do you challenge yourself to make sure that your innermost circle, the people that you work with every day, the people that you're friends with, don't just look like you, aren't just the same kind of background as you are, but that you're really striving to be involved with various groups, you're attending different programs, you're reading different books, you're making sure that you're getting to know people that are different from you and striving to learn how to be an ally to them and for them to understand who you are. And I think there's an individual kind of component to that, and then there's kind of the culture of the company, which is really fostering a lot more space for conversation, trust building, making sure people can really feel safe and like they belong. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely incumbent on leadership to set the tone and the psychological safety of the room, because the only way you can have difficult conversations is if there's a trust within the group, right? So definitely on leadership, and then just telling everybody that this is why we're here. It's gonna get messy, right? And if the intent of the debate is about how we make this better and it's not personal, then you can have those really heated conversations and still be friends afterwards.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too to think about in paradigm shifting, right, is also how can you shift accepted rules about how you were talking about the hidden rules, right, Maria? How can you shift the accepted rules of how a meeting dynamic works or how we communicate with each other? I think the neurodiversity question came up earlier, and I think it actually taps right into that, which is the idea that we all learn and actually communicate differently. And so often the default, especially I would say in American culture, but it might be applicable to many other cultures in the world, is that sometimes when you're the loudest, you're heard the most, or and you shout, right? Or that you're the one that dominates the conversation. That's not always true in every culture in the world, first of all. And secondly, it's not always really effective. I'm seeing head nods. We all know this, yes. And so the question is also, is there a shifting of rules, essentially, that a leader could take upon themselves? Or if you're running a project, looking at everybody in this room, maybe it's that somebody different leads the meeting each week that you have, the sort of regular meeting that you have, that you get together, and you let them set the agenda ahead of time so that they're prepared, but that everybody then gets a turn at leading in the room. These are the kinds of notions, I'm just planting a seed, these are the kinds of notions of things that we can start to do to question even our day-to-day interactions when we feel that sense of tension and we're trying to build trust, right? With that, I'm just gonna ask one more question, then turn it over to the audience, because I'd love us to hear from them, because we've been through a long day together, and I also know the AC, people are warm. I'm feeling it in the room. I'm getting your energy right now. So I'm just gonna do a quick clap once if you hear me, clap twice if you hear me, clap 3 times. All right. We promise we keep getting this AC going. So before we turn it over to the audience here, I really loved, I'm going to throw you all a question that wasn't in the prep. I really loved Jenna's question that she just asked the last panel about if you had unlimited resources.
I did too.
And all the money in the world, right? If money was no object to changing this, all the things you just talked about, everything we know we have to change in this business, what would you do?
So I had an idea. I was whispering to Julianne on the side, but like one of the things that I used to do when I was working with young people was we would do these like creative hackathon kind of things, right? And I feel like if we really want to discover talent, like being able to go out into communities and being able to just like have spaces where people can play and create and tell stories would be so incredible. And then for that to become a place where we actually we identify talent and we source kind of stories that then go on to like larger and larger platforms. I think that would just be, number one, I think art and play is healing. I think it provides communities for a space for connection and being able to collaborate and being able to tell their stories, right? But then it also allows for very kind of different stories from people who never would imagine themselves being an animator or being a storyteller to be able to emerge and to be able to see that for themselves. So that's what I would do.
I have this, when I first landed at Netflix, I had this mantra about leave no talent behind, because if we're trying to build up the workforce, we need everybody who's talented, and we can't depend on, fate and luck for them to make it into our industry. And I think Miles had said this earlier, but I would love to identify talent in high school of all voices, ethnicities, genders, and then if they have talent, just fund their way all the way to the industry, because then we would make sure that we get all those different voices and the top talent telling our stories. And that was like a 5 to 7 year plan, and it's super expensive, but give me the money, I'll make it happen.
I think I would even like to build schools, like make talent travel, make Malenga travel, make all these creators travel, go there into countries, underrepresented countries, and have their schools, have their, for 2 years, for even longer, a program. They talk about it, they share what their path was, how it went, programs, and really share their experience and show that animation is a real career path and that everyone can do it.
Absolutely. My thought, only because I'm all about the dollars and all about the money, is that funding every project that humanly possible that gets rejected from a current structure and say, let's reevaluate it, let's grow it, and then let's fund it. Because I think if we can get the money to the talent and help them grow, then that's what it all is. Basically a venture firm for just funding talent. How about that? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all, our fabulous audience. And you've been with us all day and in the heat. We appreciate you. Anybody have a question for our fabulous panelists? Right here in the front. I'll hand you the mic as well.
So we talk about in an ideal world, you have as much money, as you want, but we don't live in an ideal world. So how do those of us trying to kind of break into everything, how can we get in front of the people, the powers that be, I guess?
I get that question every time.
Go for it, Chris. He gets that question every time, apparently.
Yeah, I would throw the challenge back to you, right? So there is a built-in bottleneck for talent getting to the buyers just because they can't take every pitch, every idea that's out there in the world. But it's never been easier to get your ideas seen or heard, right? By putting it online. The technology is getting cheaper. If you can find some way to do a rough version of your story, to go to a live action example, Issa Rae. That's how she got Insecure made. She made a series of low-budget episodes of her idea, The Misadventures of an Angry Black Woman, that people loved, and it becomes an HBO project, right? South Park was just a little 3-minute, thing that went around Hollywood that blew everybody away. Now these guys are, how many years? 20-something years later, making plays. So if you have an idea, just get it out there and get it seen. I can't guarantee you that we'll see it, but if it has a strong enough voice, right, and point of view, and it resonates with the audience, that will get our attention.
Yeah. I want to say, you're here, you're doing the right thing. It's important to just recognize, because I think when you're in the hustle mode, sometimes it's but what am I not doing? And sometimes it's no, you are doing everything, right? And it's okay. And sometimes it's going to take that meeting. You know what I mean? It might be tomorrow. There might be some moments. So just to say that you are doing enough, you're here, you're sharing your story. And then the other thing I would say is being open to what opportunity actually exists, right? I think it's really, sometimes people can get really fixated on it needs to look like this and it needs to be here, right? In order for it to really show my vision, show my story. And I think that being open to opportunity and seeing what comes your way is also really important, to understanding that your journey might not be linear. You know what I mean? You might do this and this and this, and then suddenly you're here with your dream project. You know what I mean? And so just being open to opportunity as it emerges. So, yeah.
I would also say, you're here. There's more of us here also, from all of us. So basically, I think that's the first step, and bring it into a certain form that you feel this is how I want to present it. And again, it doesn't need to be shaped all through the way, but have a clear vision, have a clear sense of it, and then just do it and try it all over again. I know that's sometimes very hard, so I can feel that. But still, actually, going to these sessions, being here, and just coming. And now you said it. So
I also feel don't go at it alone. I think a lot of times, I think this is, I don't know if it's particularly true for women, but as a woman, I often feel that there's this enormous pressure to have to deliver. Somebody said it earlier, you carry the weight sometimes of your whole community, right? No matter what intersection that is, your whole country, right? Your whole race or ethnicity, your whole gender, whatever that might be, and that you somehow can't fail. And I want to say in this space explicitly, we in this space of WIA, of everybody who is here, we give you that permission right now. We want you to fail with us and learn with us because we're a community together. And so what I'd say to you also very practically is the WIA mentorship circles are global. They are completely virtual, and you get to meet and talk with somebody who is the top of their field in what they do, but you also get to meet 8 other people who are connected to WIA all around the world. And that right there can become the beginning of a project. It can be the move to sell something. It could actually be more than just the mentorship circle. So I think sometimes even thinking about, you were saying like you're right here, right now, right? But thinking about even the opportunities that come your way in spaces like this as something beyond even what they're called, if that makes sense, right? Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So I also think that, we're at this inflection point in our industry, just like even globally, where there's a desire for these companies, our companies, to find all kinds of content from different voices. And you will see in the coming years more and more competitions, more programs that are targeted for women, people of color, LGBTQ, disabled, like wanting to hear their stories. So we're spending money to find you. So you're making yourself available, like you said, but like just seek out these programs, keep your ear to the ground, because we're going to be putting them out there.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure WIA is sharing that knowledge also with all of you consistently, so you know what's going on out there. I'm looking at Jenna because I'm like, we're going to do this. Next question. Anybody? Oh, wait, front row. We'll go to you and then you. Perfect. Yeah.
A students.
I know.
Hi, thank you. Forgive me, I've been trying to formulate this question pretty much since this morning throughout all of the talks. So I'm not really sure if I'll articulate it very well. But throughout everything that has been happening, a question that has constantly, something has constantly been plaguing at my mind the entire time, and that was sort of reaching the communities that don't have access to this. Yeah. Because like I teach at an institution in South Africa, and I see students come and go all the time. Some from rural areas who don't even really know what animation is, but they see something on a bus ride to Joburg, and then they get really excited. They want to come into it, but they've never worked on a tablet before. They hardly have money to get into university. They can't study at like animation institutions. But they've all got really great stories, and they've all got really great dreams. And there are some initiatives that will go into these communities to help them. But sometimes it feels like it's not enough because that sustainability isn't there. And so, again, like I said, I don't really know what the question is, but it was just that thing that is constantly, how do I help grow these communities or these students or these people that want to tell their stories? And then it was kind of two-pronged. From there, if they do have the privilege of getting into an institution, what is it that we should be teaching them? Because should they be storytellers? Are they animators? Do they need to be storyboard artists? How do we know like how to pitch? Should we teach them critical thinking on like how to engage with content and representation? There's just so much that a student has to learn before even entering the workspace to be a decent individual and a unique individual and your own like sort of voiced person. And so, yeah,
It's fantastic. Fantastic.
I hear you. I mean, I have a lot of family in South Africa, so I've been there a few times. But this is not this is not just South Africa. But I hear you in terms of like where your heart is. Not everyone's going to be able to do this, right? That's the reality. And so just like level set, like that is actually just the reality. But I do think for me, it goes back to like, what is the art form? Like, and is there value in the art form outside of commercial value? Yes, right? And so how do we start to use animation in like our educational institutions as a way of self-expression, as a way of learning, as a way of processing information and all of that? I think that that's actually really important, because if you make it part of the toolbox that everybody gets, then what you start to see is the people who are like, oh, this is my thing, right? They actually have an opportunity to even identify it first for themselves, right? Because what you're talking about is like a lack of awareness that this is even a thing. right? And so if we can normalize this as something that is accessible to everyone, and that success, and it's not an art form that is tied to commercial success. It's an art form that is for all of us as human beings to have access to, right? And then from there, and so people can start to build some fluency with it, right? And identify, this is what I'm passionate about. This speaks to me in a way that nothing else does, right? And then from there, for them to be able to pursue that. And then there's all the work that's being done around training programs and accessibility and all of that. But I think we have to decouple the art form from the commercial kind of institutions, because I think that will help with accessibility. And then just really encouraging that art and expression and creativity is actually present in our schools is key to that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I feel like I wish maybe the schools could, I'd do a little better, because I don't want to judge them. I know there's like really hard jobs, but just to make them aware of like all the jobs that are out there. We do try and have Netflix executives go to high schools and colleges to inform students the possibilities, because the biggest problem is, let's say this kid from the rural area of South Africa grows up, he or she's in their 20s, and now they want to be an animator, okay? And they're just learning how to do it, but their more privileged counterparts have been doing it for 5 to 10 years, and so now they're playing this game of catch-up, right? And so that's the biggest problem. So now they're a decade behind. So how can we get this information out there and dare them to dream as soon as possible? And then once we make them aware of that, then it's incumbent on us to give them access to this education, which we're starting to do, that's free, so they can learn it, upskill what they are at their craft, and then give them opportunities on whatever shows that we're producing. So I think that's the, I would say, blueprint. We just have to figure out how to execute it.
Absolutely, thank you. And by the way, your question was phenomenal.
I would like to know, what should they learn in college? Should they learn animate? Like, do you have an opinion on that? I think
actually telling their story would be very powerful, telling what they want to tell, what they feel like they haven't seen, and they really want to show the world and tell the world, and then see how they do that in best. Is it writing a story? Is it drawing a story? Is it recording a story? There's so many ways, and basically, first of all, thinking about that, what is the story, and then finding the way how to bring the story across. And I think actually also something that sounds really stupid now, but always encouraging learning by doing, like doing it all over again. It's because nobody's perfect the first time he or she does it or they do it, but the more they do it and the more they embrace it and try over again, actually the better it also gets.
Absolutely. I think about, there's one, and we have one here, and then I'll go to the back there, and then there. We'll do a little circle. One of the programs, in case you want to look them up, because I actually think they speak to this really deeply, is Young Storytellers, which is a program based out of Los Angeles, but they're expanding, just FYI. And I think that something that they do is exactly this, which is to say, they go to students who would otherwise never have access to this industry or thinking about this even as a profession, right? Because even thinking about this as a profession is a privilege of sorts. We have to recognize that as well, right? In the hierarchy of needs of somebody's life. And I think what is amazing is they have them write original pieces and to actually talk about the things they are feeling. It's essentially therapy in many ways, but at the same time, teaching story principles along that. And what's amazing that they do is they have them write mini plays that are then brought to life by professional actors. Some of these folks are people that they've watched on the screen who are now saying their words, the words they put down. And the experience of connecting the fact that something I wrote that is from my own experience is coming to life before me in this very tangible way with an artist maybe that I respect or I love or I have some sort of emotional connection to. There's really nothing like it, because it starts, to your point, Maria, is it decouples the commercial from the creative and allows them to think about it truly in the context of their own life story. And I think there's something really profound about that journey, and actually has led to writers actually coming out of that program, and now as adults they're professional writers. And so it actually is pathwaying in really interesting ways. But I think the approach, the philosophical approach, is a really interesting one of what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was actually on the board before I came out here, Young Storytellers, so I know it well. And I've seen the light bulb go off in these kids' faces when they see an actor from HBO act out, these scripts that, they were helped written, but they're taught it in a way. And I do believe, I don't like the way writing is taught in schools in general, because it's taught, with all the rules first. Like, they should let them just write their voices out and then put rules around it, and we might get some more interesting storytellers. But, to that point, you have one kid do Young Storytellers in 6th grade, really have a fascination for writing, then do ghetto film school in high school, and then graduate and go to college and maybe do film. I recommend you don't have to go to film school or animation school to be a great storyteller, but there is a path, and if we can just kind of just get that out there, so it's like more often in these underserved areas, it'd just be it'd be easier for us to find them.
Great. Oh, yes, please. Doctor.
I'm a mother to an animator. She's sitting next to me. And one of the CEOs of the schools in South Africa said it's important to have programs for parents because many a time the children will do what the parents expose them to. And when she said to me I wanted to do animation, I didn't know what it was, even though I'm an educated person. And when I did the research and I understood it, then I could support her, and I was the only support for her. And so the CEO from an animation school said it's important for parents to be involved in this program so that they can then be able to lead their children to do animation and then be able to support them. So one of the things that I was asked is to talk to the parents to say, this is not a Mickey Mouse, in inverted commas, job. It is, sort of for the fun. But that they can make a living out of it. And I said to her, if she doesn't make it, I'll take her to medical school. So we need to have programs for parents as well so that they can then support their kids in animation.
Absolutely. Round of applause for the doctor. 1,000%. Next question? Yeah.
Thank you, Julianne.
Anytime. And then we'll head to the back and around. I've seen you.
I'm not really sure why I'm saying this. I just feel really inspired to say this, and I'm really terrified, which usually means it's the right thing to do. So I just wanted to say, as you were talking about all the pathways and what to do and all of that, I just wanted to share. I come from New York. I have musical theater. I write for Broadway, musical theater scripts. If you think getting in as a woman is hard here, oh my gosh, that market is ridiculous. And if you get in, it's very derogatory. But then you go, well, I guess I have to put up with this to try. I mean, the Tonys were last night. So many women, the first time women got, it's 2022. Why is this the first time? But that all being said, of course, COVID killed us. Killed anything new, especially, but everything. At that point, my producer said, we can't even look at what you're doing. We can barely keep what we have alive. So I said, well, then I'll find someone who can. And I started looking at different ways of doing. I know nothing about animation. I'm musical theater. My kids loved anime, and I'm like, why are you watching cartoons? I don't get it. And then they showed me anime, and I went, oh, okay, I got it. This is amazing. That being said, I started learning about character development from Meg LaFoe. I met Meg LaFoe, and she introduced me to women in animation. And she said, why don't you go for the mentorship? Oh, why would they take me in the mentorship? I got into the mentorship with Nosfo a year and a half ago. And she gave me the safe place to have a dream, to say, you know what? I said, what if, I didn't say it for the first 3 weeks, but I said, what if you took a musical theater script and put it into anime in a series? Never been done. That's crazy, right? And she's like, why is that crazy? Let me get you some connections. Let me introduce you to Sam in South Africa. Let me introduce you to my animator in Japan. And it's now, that was literally June of last year? Here we are a year later, and I'm pitching this. We're going to be having conversations, people, because we want this to have a great ending, right? Yes, let's make the made-for-TV movie out of this. But I just want to say that the pathway, don't try and make sense of it, because it doesn't make sense at all. It's just, but if you feel like it will be hard, but if they're insurmountable, maybe think of a different pathway. But if they're not, they're just hard, that's the job. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunities that women in animation. I wouldn't even have the courage to dream. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you. Profoundly thank you. And as I go to the last question, just a reminder, we have a mixer after this, or a get-together, if you will, outside of this room at 5 o'clock as we wrap up. So if you'd like to stay and meet everybody and build those connections she was talking about, when we wrap up today, we'll be heading right out there. So I just wanted to make sure to stay that, so you stick around and you have some fun with us, because we've talked about a lot of heavy things today. So we all might need a little break and some time with each other. How about that? Yes? In the back? Perfect.
So the question came up, what do you do with kids that have never had any opportunities? And that is what we faced when we started Incessant Rain Studios in Kathmandu, Nepal. And what we figured is that our mandate is going to be upliftment of young people. So we started with 7 people, and we have trained people ever since. Fast forward 14 years, we have a vibrant company, and there is so much demand that we are opening an academy. But there will be a lot of scholarships, especially for girls. Chris, you asked, what should they be taught in college? And we have come up with a plan, and I think it's going to work really well. The academy will have a 9-month to a year program, and it will teach students in visual effects, animation, web apps development, Python programming, and filmmaking, and get them ready for jobs, entry-level jobs. And since we're going to be hiring them, they are going to be qualified, because you guys know, right, those outsourced, that quality is a big concern. But while they're going through the program, we will have like a drawing class, a painting class, an acting class from some of the people in the United States that are really well known. So it kind of adds panache to the program, right? And if the students, addressing your question, how do you even tell them, how do you figure out what it is that they should pursue, they kind of see things happening. And they'll go, can I do that? Can I go there? And I say, yes, you can, but first let's get you a job. And then we have a program with a local university, and we have, they will be granting credits for their work at the studio as well as their study at the academy. We're not affiliated, but we have figured out a way where people can still get an education beyond their 9-month, 12-month, because we're really looking at developing careers and future change makers. So they need to know about leadership and marketing and communications and learn about history, learn from history, make history, right? So what we do here in animation as a company, it's not just making cartoons. That's almost cartoony to think we just make cartoons, right? We are changing the lives of people. We're moving the needle. And for that, you need leadership. And this whole thing is coming together because I have a brother who is a philanthropist, and he had his company go public in a big way. And so he's like, Dee, which is big sister, let's do something together there. So, okay. And then I have a local equity investor. We brought them in. And then, however, we control the narrative. We control if the dividends will be paid. We control everything. So without that kind of a support, I think it's hard. But if you really want to uplift the youth in your community, you start with 5 and then go from there. I expect to have about 1,000 graduates in less than 2 years. And I promise I want to bring a job for each graduate. So I'm going to be reaching out to every production house in the world saying, I have 1,000 graduates, and we will be about 5,000 graduates in about 5 years. And that should solve a lot of labor shortage problems as well.
Yeah. Give her that round of applause. Thank you. That's incredible. Well, unfortunately, we're at time, and I'm going to hand the mic over in a second. So we'll get to the questions over here. Happy to approach us in the mixer and the get-together. But I want to thank all of you for being with us today. And please, can you give us a round of applause here for our phenomenal panelists who have joined us. And remember the mixer or the get-together that we're having right after this outside this room. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to WIA's president, Marge Dean, to close us out for the day. Marge.
Thank you so much for coming. Today has been an amazing day, amazing stories all over the place continually. And we hope you will join us for a cocktail and get to talk to each other. And I also want you to make a special thank you to Julianne, who has walked us through the day. There was a lot of really heavy stuff talked about and a lot of serious content, and I think her skill as a speaker and as a very funny person just made it very palatable, and I'm sure everybody received lots of information, largely due to her abilities to be able to speak. So again, let's thank Julianne. Yeah. Okay, so everybody, let's go have some wine, have some soda, have some snacks.